It is coming up on 5:30 and time for the Town Hall here on Channel 2 News at 5:30. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Kate Welshofer.
And hello, everybody. I'm Michael Wooten. Lots to talk about today, thanks to the questions that you've texted us to 849-2200. Former Congressman Chris Collins pardoned by the president. What does that mean for the disgraced politician? And we'll have reaction to that big announcement.
Also ahead, your questions answered on the coronavirus vaccine. Two doctors here to help us out today.
And then later on, we're going to talk live with Vic Carucci, who covers the Buffalo Bills and has for a long time, as we are now learning that fans may be in the stands come playoff time. A lot of logistics to work out there, Kate.
Yeah, we've got all that ahead for you tonight, but we're going to start with the news that disgraced former Representative Chris Collins, who represented a lot of you in Congress, is now a free man after he was pardoned by President Trump.
Yeah, Collins was one of 20 controversial pardons and commutations announced last night. He had served only 10 weeks of a 26-month sentence at a federal prison camp in Florida.
So what does this pardon mean? We're going to get into that, and we'll take a look at the front page of today's Buffalo News. The headline, "Critics Furious as Trump Pardons Collins." Jerry Zremski wrote that article and several others detailing this pardon. He is the Washington, D.C. bureau chief.
Yeah, Jerry, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate your time as always. And I think you've done about 8 stories over the past 24 hours, so everybody should go check them all out. Yeah, seriously. So you mentioned there in the headline, in the paper edition earlier this morning, critics kind of going after this announcement, especially elected officials. There seems to be a bit of a partisan divide on this. Can you walk us through that reaction?
Yeah, certainly. Democrats are absolutely furious. They look at Collins as someone who abused his office. He was at the White House, on the White House lawn at a party when he made a cell phone call to his son to pass on an insider stock tip. And the Democrats really see this as a terrible breach of what they ought to do in Congress. I think deep down, probably some Republicans do too, but they are generally not talking. The only Republican who gave me a comment on all of this was Congressman Tom Reed, who sent us a statement that was an acknowledgement that the president had the power to make this pardon, and that also said that Collins had basically, already been punished to some degree. But that was it. I got no comment at all from Congressman Chris Jacobs and other members of Congress. Well, they have a lot of other things on their minds right now, but they've not had anything to say. And as for the other critics, citizens activists are furious. The people who complain to ethics authorities about Collins' behavior, they are furious. And in a story that I just finished writing for tomorrow, where I talked to a bunch of legal experts in the pardon power, they're furious too.
So Jerry, earlier today, Michael spoke with Tony Ogorek, a financial planner in Williamsville, and you spoke to him as part of your reporting on Collins' stock trades long before the indictment or the guilty plea. And Tony noticed that something wasn't right pretty early on. Here's how he summed up the pardon.
It reinforces, the perception again that we have a 2-tiered legal system. It reinforces the perception that people who we hold to a higher standard, our federal elected officials, they can get away with whatever they want. They're going to cover for each other, and that's why I think Congress's ratings are around 18% in terms of their approval ratings. The whole thing is just pretty ugly all the way around and really doesn't do anyone any good except for the parties involved.
And it really kind of sounds like a lot of people agree with Tony's assessment. That's kind of seems like what you have been hearing. Does that include Collins' constituents as well?
Well, I have a feeling that the Collins constituents who've long opposed him view it that way. I'm not so certain that Republicans would view it that way. After all, this is a very partisan time. People are very dug into their beliefs. And judging from the reaction to what I've been putting on Twitter over the last 24 hours, I've been seeing things saying like, well, Collins talked to his son. There's nothing wrong with talking to your son. So maybe that's what some Republicans are believing. But the thing that's wrong with talking to your son in this circumstance is that you're giving the son inside information that will allow him to benefit in ways that other investors could not benefit. So, as Tony said, it's a breach of what the ethics of stock trading are or ought to be. And it really could threaten the integrity of the markets if people could just routinely trade on such inside information.
Yeah, Tony was also talking today about how it's not a victimless crime. I mean, it is a theft because there were investors who lost money as a result of Chris Collins' criminal conduct. No question, though, that President Trump was within his rights to issue these pardons. It is a very broad power in the Constitution. And also keep in mind, former President Bill Clinton pardoned 2 former members of Congress. I was doing some research on that last night. Many presidents have made controversial pardons, but there is now talk about maybe starting to curtail that power a little bit. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has talked about possible legislation. Is there any renewed talk of that in Washington, D.C. right now? Because it seems like these pardons are getting a lot of discussion there among all the other big topics that are ongoing.
Yeah, there is discussion of somehow reining in the power pardon. The pardon power, but honestly, I don't know how it could be done without a constitutional amendment. The way the clause in the Constitution is stated, it's just very broad. The only reason that a president can't pardon someone is if a federal official has been impeached. That's the only limit that's placed on it. And so I don't believe that constitutionally Congress can just slap on more limits. I think they would need to go the constitutional amendment route.
And Jerry, you were in court as Collins was sentenced. I want to share part of the transcript. Collins' attorney said, quote, "He forever carries the stain of a felony conviction and the loss of certain civic rights, including the right to vote, which for somebody that was involved in public service is a heavy price." So now that's not true anymore. With this pardon, Collins gets back his right to vote, his right to run for office if he would like, his right to carry a gun, and the right to serve on a jury. And one of the things that strikes us is that it's not true for his son. So while Chris Collins, who started this illegal scheme, will be able to vote, able to carry a gun, his son Cameron, who is still in his 20s, does not get those rights back. He's never going to be able to carry a weapon, for instance. Throughout the guilty plea and sentencing, Chris always said that his intention was to protect his son. So it all is a bit ironic the way it turns out.
Yeah, it is ironic. I would stress, though, that in the state of Florida, where both of them live now, felons now can vote. That's a big controversy in the state of Florida, but it may just end up being that Cameron Collins is going to be able to vote as well.
Yeah, Jerry, before we let you go, we do want to ask you, and obviously we encourage everybody to read Jerry's reporting on Chris Collins because there's so much more to this story, and I think it'll be in the news for a while. But while we have you, the other big story in Washington, D.C. right now is this COVID relief bill. I mean, we talked to you on Friday. I know there was a lot of uncertainty at that time. It seemed like this all wrapped up over the weekend and it was a done deal. And then President Trump is now saying that he wants $2,000 payments for individuals instead of $600. Democrats are like, yeah, we'd love to do that. Nancy Pelosi saying we'll vote on it right now. How much of a wrinkle is that throwing into all of this? And what's the latest as we sit here at 5:36, 2 days before Christmas?
Well, President Trump is going to decide how big of a wrinkle he wants this to be. If he vetoes this legislation, it's going to mean that quickly after Christmas, Congress is going to have to come back and either try to override the veto or pass different legislation with that $2,000 payment in it. Politically, this is very difficult for Republicans because a lot of Republicans aren't really crazy about the size of this bill, and they don't want to see it grow beyond $1 trillion. If you start making these payments that big, it's going to get up beyond $1 trillion, and the fiscal conservatives in the party are really not going to like that very much. So it's very difficult to predict right now what's going to happen because, as we've learned over the course of 4 years, it's very difficult to predict what Donald Trump is going to do.
Lots to talk about. We know that you're a busy guy. Jerry, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.